More Animal Stories by Dick King-Smith. Read by Sophie Aldred and Mark Williams.
Poppet. When Poppet was born, he had absolutely no idea what sort of animal he was. He looked around and saw that he was surrounded by a forest of legs. Huge legs they were, thick and tall and greyish in colour, with huge feet on the end of them. Poppet looked up and saw, on top of all those legs, huge bodies with huge heads and huge ears and amazingly long, long noses. He was, in fact, looking up at his mother and a number of his aunties, who had all come along to inspect this new baby. "Oh," said one auntie, "isn't he a puppet?" The baby's mother looked extremely pleased. "What are you going to call him?" said another auntie. The baby's mother, whose own name was Uma, said, "I don't know. I haven't had time to think." And then she thought for a bit, and then she said, "But now I do know. I'll call him Poppet." And she put the tip of her trunk against one of the baby's ears and whispered, "Hello, baby. I'm your mum, and your name is Poppet." Poppet looked up at Uma and the other huge animals and said, "Please, what sort of animals are you?" "Elephants," said Uma. "We are African elephants." "Oh," said Poppet, "but you said you were my mum." "Yes." "So, does that make me an African elephant?" "Yes." Poppet looked puzzled. "There must be some mistake," he thought. "You're enormous," he said, "and I'm very small. We can't be the same sort of animal." "Oh, yes, we are," said Uma. "It's just that you're a baby elephant." "But you'll grow," said one of the aunties. "And grow," said another. "And grow, and grow, and grow," said all the others. "Until you're as big as we are," said Uma. "You might even be bigger one day." "Tomorrow," said Poppet. At this, the aunties all laughed quietly, making snuffly noises in their trunks, before moving slowly and heavily away, leaving mother and baby alone together. "No, not tomorrow, Poppet," said Uma gently. "Elephants take a long, long time to grow to full size, but you'll get there one day. There's nothing to stop you, for we are too big, and our skins are too thick for any other creature in Africa to hurt us. Except two." "What are they, Mum?" asked Poppet. "One," said Uma, "is a monkey-like thing called a man. Men kill elephants." "Why?" "For their tusks." "What are tusks?" "Great big long teeth that elephants have, like these two of mine." "I haven't got any." "You will. But you should be all right, because we live in a special place called a reserve, where elephants are protected." "Oh," said Poppet. "But you said there were two creatures that could hurt us. What's the other one besides a man?" "A mouse," said Uma. "Oh," said Poppet. "Are they even bigger and stronger than us, these mouses?" "Mice," said Uma, "are very small. And what's more, mice live in holes. And that's the trouble." She stretched out her long, long trunk till the tip of it was right in front of Poppet's face. "What do you see, Poppet?" she said. "A hole," said Poppet. Then Uma, speaking slowly and solemnly, repeated to her newborn child the old elephant wives' tale that her mother had told her when she was a baby, a tale in which she had always believed. "Poppet, my son," she said, "first, never have anything to do with mice. Second, if you should be unfortunate enough to meet one, keep your trunk curled up out of the way. Never, never put the tip of it anywhere near a mouse, otherwise the most dreadful thing imaginable will happen to you." "What's that?" said Poppet. "The mouse,"
will run up the inside of your trunk."
Poppet thought about this for the rest of the first day of his life. He imagined this thing called a mouse running along inside his little trunk, and he did not like the thought of it at all. Suppose one did? How would he get rid of it? Blow it out, he supposed, and every so often, for the remainder of the day, he blew very hard, suddenly down his trunk, just in case one of the awful creatures had somehow crept in. "I don't even know what they look like," he thought, "only that they're small." The next morning, while the elephant herd was browsing upon the leaves of some large trees, Poppet was standing beside his mother when he saw a strange animal moving about on the bark of one of the trees. What it was he didn't know, but it was certainly small. Carefully curling his trunk up out of harm's way, Poppet bent his head towards it. Close up, he could see that the creature, though small, was long, with a great many joints to its dark brown body, and a very great many legs. "Perfect for crawling up elephants' trunks," he thought. "I bet you are one," he said, politely. "Excuse me, but are you a mouse?"
"A mouse?"
said the creature. "Yes, I thought you might be."
"You're joking. Pull the other one."
"Other what?"
"Leg."
What does it mean? Poppet thought. He's got hundreds of legs. "Well, if you're not a mouse," he said, "what are you?"
"I'm a giant millipede,"
said the long, wriggly creature. "A giant?" said Poppet.
"Oh, stop taking the mickey,"
said the millipede huffily.
"You knew all the time, didn't you? I could tell. I wasn't born yesterday."
"I was," said Poppet, as the giant millipede rippled away. "But anyway, I've learned something. That animal was not a mouse." In the days and weeks that followed, he asked quite a number of small creatures whether they were mice. He asked beetles and grubs, and worms and caterpillars, and little lizards, and small frogs, and some replied jokily, and some replied angrily, and some didn't answer. Till at last, Poppet rather forgot about his mother's dire warning, and gave himself up to enjoying the carefree life of a baby elephant. He used his trunk for reaching up and pulling down leaves and twigs, and for sucking up water when the herd went to the river to drink, and then blowing water all over himself. When he was nice and wet, he would go to a dusty place and use his trunk to give himself a dust bath, so that he finished up beautifully muddy. Then he'd go back into the river and have a lovely bathe, going right under the water with just the tip of his trunk sticking up above the surface, like a snorkel. A trunk, Poppet decided, was a brilliant thing to have. As for mice, he never thought about them any more. Then, one hot afternoon, when he was about a month old, and his mother and all the aunties were standing resting in the shade, Poppet wandered off a little way, exploring. He was using his trunk to search about in the grass as he went along, when suddenly he saw in front of him an animal that he had not previously met. It was furry and brown, with large tulip-shaped ears, beady black eyes, and a longish, hairless tail, and Poppet stretched out his trunk towards it and sniffed at it. Even when the tip of his trunk was right before the creature's face, it didn't occur to him that this animal was small, and, without much hope, because he'd been wrong so many times, he said, "Are you a mouse?" "As a matter of fact," said the animal, "I am. And you know what mice do to elephants, don't you?" Hastily, Poppet raised his trunk. "Aha!" said the mouse. "Your mum told you, did she?" "Told me what?" "That mice run up inside elephants' trunks." "Well, yes," said Poppet. "She did." "And you believed her?" "Yes." The mouse let out a loud squeak, whether of anger or of fright, Poppet did not know. In fact, it was of delight. "What are you called, boy?" it said. Poppet, what about you? My name, said the mouse, is Momo, and I am very glad to meet you. Oh, said Poppet. Why? Because, said Momo, when I was very young, my mother told me this story about mice and elephants, and I didn't believe her. That's rubbish, I thought. One day I said to myself, I'll meet an elephant and find out if it's true. And now I've met one. But you're not going to find out, said Poppet, and he curled his trunk even higher. Oh, come on, said Momo. Dear sport, just let me have a look at it. No, cried Poppet. You'll crawl in. I won't, honest. Promise. Cross my heart. So very slowly, Poppet uncurled his trunk and lowered the tip of it towards the waiting mouse. The nearer it got to Momo, the more nervous Poppet became. I must be mad, he thought, believing a mouse's promise. Mice probably don't know the meaning of the word. Then suddenly he felt the tickle of whiskers at the very tip of his trunk as Momo peered into it, and he gave an enormous sneeze. Elephants, like people, shut their eyes when they sneeze, and when Poppet opened his again, it was to see that the mouse had been blown head over heels by the force of the blast. Steady on, cried Momo. What are you playing at? Sorry, said Poppet. I sneezed. Oh, well, bless you. Thanks. It was your whiskers. They're tickled. Just testing. A mouse can go into any hole that's wider than its whiskers. And was it? It would have been a very tight fit, said Momo. Might be possible with a full-grown elephant, but I shouldn't have cared to try it with you, Poppet, my lad. Anyway, to be quite frank, it looked pretty damp and uninviting up there, even before the sneeze. As it is, I'm soaked. I'll dry you, said Poppet, and he pointed his trunk at the mouse and blew long, slow, hot breaths over him. It was while he was doing this that he suddenly heard his mother's voice, and a very angry voice it was. Uma had walked up behind him quite silently, as elephants do on their great cushioned feet, only to see her son, with his trunk outstretched, the tip of it only centimetres from a mouth. She let out a furious trumpet, and Momo vanished from sight.
What did I tell you? Screamed Uma. Keep away from mice, do you hear me? Get out of my way now, and I'll squash this one flat.
Oh, don't, Mum, cried Poppet. He's my friend.
Your friend? Snorted Uma. You're not just a bad child, you're a mad child.
And she went stamping about in the grass till she'd flattened a big patch of it.
That should have fixed the horrid creature,
she said, and she moved away to rejoin the herd, grumbling to herself. Poppet stood sadly beside the trampled patch. Alas, poor mouse, he said. It's all my fault that he's dead. No, he isn't, said a voice, and out of the grass poked a little brown head, whiskers twitching. Momo! cried Poppet. You're not hurt?
Got a bit of a headache.
How on earth did you survive?
Under earth. Went down a hole, sharpish, said the mouse, but not before I heard what you said, which was nice of you, Poppet. You are my friend too.
Meanwhile, Uma was telling the aunties about her naughty child. One of the first things I told him, she said, was to keep away from mice. We all know that every mouse is just waiting for a chance to run up the inside of our trunks.
We do,
said the aunties. And no doubt you all gave your kids the same warning.
We did,
said the aunties. And what have I just found? Only my boy with the tip of his trunk right beside a mouse, that's all. I told him off, I can tell you. No doubt you'd have done the same.
We would,
said the aunties.
Children, said Uma, they just don't listen.
Grown-ups, said Poppet to Momo at about the same time. "They don't treat children fairly, grown-ups don't. I could have explained to Mum if she'd let me. I could have told her, 'You're wrong. Mice don't run up elephants' trunks. I know. My friend told me. But no, I never got the chance. She just yelled at me.'"
"I heard it,"
said Momo. "Let's just hope we're more understanding when we're grown-ups," said Poppet.
"Actually," said Momo, "I'm a grown-up already."
"Oh, sorry. I didn't realise. You're so,
Small?
well, yes,"
"Tell you what, Poppet," said the mouse. "Do you agree that it would be a good thing if elephants stopped being frightened of mice?"
"Yes, I do."
"And do you agree that it would be a good thing if elephants stopped trying to squash mice?"
"Oh, yes, I do."
"Right then, this is my plan. Listen carefully."
And so it was that later that day, when the herd had been down to the river to bathe, and the elephants were all standing in the shade resting, Poppet said to Uma, "Mum, will you promise not to yell at me if I tell you something?"
"Of course I won't,"
said Uma, who was already rather ashamed of losing her temper with her little one. "Of course you won't promise?"
"No, of course I won't yell at you."
"All right then," said Poppet. "It's this. Mice do not run up inside elephants' trunks. They never have, and they never will." Uma snorted.
"Come and listen to this,"
she called to the aunties, and when they had all gathered round, she made Poppet repeat his words.
"Silly boy,"
said one auntie, and "Stupid child," said another, and a third said,
"You had a narrow escape this morning. You might not be so lucky another time."
"Wait here, please," said Poppet, and he disappeared into some bushes. When he emerged again, Uma and the aunties could see that he was holding something in the tip of his trunk, something furry and brown, with large tulip-shaped ears, beady black eyes, and a longish, hairless tail. A mouse! How horrified they all were! They formed a circle around Poppet, their trunks held high out of the reach of the dreaded creature that he carried, and they shifted anxiously from foot to foot, fanning their great ears. Poppet put the mouse carefully down upon the ground. "This is Momo," he said to Uma and the aunties. "My friend, like I told you, Mum. I know I am only a child, but Momo is a grown-up, even though you may think he's not grown very far. However, he has a grown-up brain, I can tell you, and he wishes to address you all, if you will be kind enough to listen to him." So astonished were the elephants, first to see Poppet carrying the mouse, and then to hear him make such a speech, that they stopped fidgeting and stood silent, except for the rumbling of their tummies, which they couldn't help. Momo sat up on his hunkers. "Ladies," he said, "it is a great privilege to be allowed to speak to you, and," he turned to face Uma, "especially you, madam, the mother of a truly remarkable child." Elephants can't blush, but if Uma could have done, she would have done. "Poppet," the mouse went on, "is a name that all elephants will remember for all time, since it is he, with a little help from myself, who has been the first of his kind to discover that mice do not, never have, and never will run up the inside of elephants' trunks. I call upon him now to conclude this historic day by offering to all of you the proof of what I have just said, so that none of you here, indeed none of your kind throughout the length and breadth of Africa, need ever again worry about meeting a mouse trunk to face. Now, Poppet, say your piece." "Mum," said Poppet, "do you love me?" "Oh, yes, Poppet," said Uma. "Would you do anything for me?" "Oh, yes." "Then uncurl your trunk and stretch out the tip of it to Momo."
"Oh, no, Poppet, I couldn't."
"Courage, madam," said Momo, while all the aunties cried,
Go on, Uma!
safe in the knowledge that they didn't have to do it. It'll be all right, Mum, said Poppet. Honest. So very slowly, with her eyes tight shut, Uma uncoiled her trunk and laid the tip of it on the ground, right beside the mouth. Momo peered up it, careful, remembering Poppet's sneeze, not to touch it with his whiskers. Yuck, he said softly. Then he said to Uma, Thank you, madam. I appreciate your confidence and your courage, and I am filled with admiration for the undoubted beauty, strength, and dexterity of your magnificent nasal appendage. I hope, however, that you will forgive me if I say that nothing in this world could ever persuade me to creep up your trunk. I had a job to keep a straight face, said Momo, when the herd had moved away, shaking their great heads in wonder at what they had just seen and heard. Uma especially seemed quite overcome by what had happened, and when Poppet said to her, Mum, can I stay and play with Momo? She answered, Yes, of course, dear, as though hypnotised. When they were alone, Poppet said, What shall we play? Can you think of a game? Yes, said Momo. Put down your trunk and I'll run up it. Oh, no, cried Poppet. You mean it's true after all, what Mum told me? And I thought you were my friend. I am, said Momo. Don't get your trunk in a twist. I just want to run up the outside.
Little Red Riding Pig. Little Red Riding Pig set out one day to visit her grandmother. She was called Little Red Riding Pig because she was small, of a ginger colour, and always rode about on her mountain bike. Cycling through a forest glade, she met a wolf. "Hold it right there, baby," said the wolf. Little Red Riding Pig held it. "Where you heading?" said the wolf. "To visit my grandmother," replied Little Red Riding Pig. The wolf thought quickly. "Not a lot of meat on this piglet," he said to himself, "but the granny, now she might make a square meal." "Your granny kind of fat?" he asked in a casual way. "Oh, yes," said Little Red Riding Pig. "She's very fat." "Sure like to meet her," said the wolf. "She live round here someplace?" "Oh, yes," said Little Red Riding Pig, and she told the wolf how to get to her grandmother's house, and away he went. When he arrived, he knocked on the door, and a voice called, "Come in, my dear." So he did. There, lying in bed, was the fattest pig the wolf had ever seen. "Goodness me," said the pig, "I thought you were my little granddaughter." "'Fraid not, ma'am," said the wolf. "But I see now," said Little Red Riding Pig's grandmother, "that you are in fact a handsome stranger. What big ears you have!" "All the better to hear you with," thought the wolf, but he kept his mouth shut. "And what big eyes you have!" "All the better to see you with," thought the wolf, but he said nothing, merely opening his jaws in a kind of silent laugh. "And what big teeth you have!" said the fat pig. And before the wolf could think about that, she went on, "Which reminds me, I have the toothache. I should be so grateful if you could look and see which tooth is causing the trouble." "Why, sure, ma'am," said the wolf, and he approached the bed, dribbling slightly at the thought of the feast in store. The fat pig opened her mouth wide, and the wolf bent his head to look into it. Not long afterwards, Little Red Riding Pig came pedalling up on her mountain bike. Usually when she knocked on the door, her grandmother would call, "Come in, my dear," but now all she heard was a grunt. She opened the door. Her grandmother looked even fatter than usual, and there was something else odd about her. "Why, Granny," cried Little Red Riding Pig in amazement, "you have grown a long grey beard." But it was only the wolf's tail, still sticking out of her grandmother's mouth. The Owl and the Pussycat. You all know that the Owl and the Pussycat went to sea in a beautiful pea-green boat. But do you remember the piggywig they met in a wood with a ring at the end of his nose? And do you ever wonder what he did with the shilling that they gave him? Well, listen. Said the piggy, I will. At last, said the piggy-wig, I can rootle. Rootling in the ground with their strong snouts is something all pigs love doing, but they cannot rootle if they have rings in their noses. At last, said the piggy-wig again, I am rid of that horrid ring. And what's more, the owl and that pussycat actually paid me for it. A whole shilling, though I do not know what on earth to do with it. But talking of earth gives me an idea. And he dug a little hole with his snout and buried the shilling in a safe place under the bong tree. Then off he went all round the wood, rootling and rootling to his heart's content. He had turned up all sorts of nice things, bulbs and roots and beetles, when suddenly his snout struck upon something hard. It was a large spoon, whose handle had been bent at right angles to its bowl by the force of the pig's rootling. At that moment, the turkey who lives on the hill came strutting by. That spoon won't be much use to you at the wedding feast, he said. I haven't been asked, said the pig. Pity, said the turkey. They're having mince and slices of quince. The pig licked his lips. I could get you an invite, said the turkey. Could you? Said the pig eagerly. At a price. How much? 1 shilling. Done, said the pig, and he rushed back to the bong tree and dug up his shilling and gave it to the turkey. Next day, the owl and the pussycat were married by the turkey who lives on the hill. All the invited guests, including the pig, were there, and all had brought wedding presents, except the pig. What can I give them? He whispered anxiously to the turkey, who sniggered and replied, Give him that old spoon. Quickly, for he did not want to miss the wedding feast, the pig ran back to the wood and found the spoon. When he returned with it, he could see that something was wrong. The pussycat was in tears, the owl was trying to comfort her, and the guests were tut-tutting and dear-dearing among themselves. All ruined, cried the pussycat, all wasted. Oh, lovely pussy, said the owl, whatever's the matter? Mince, cried the pussycat, and slices of quince. There's only one possible way to eat them, and that we cannot do. At this moment, the piggy-wig pushed his way through the crowd of guests, and dropped before the unhappy couple the large spoon with the right-angled handle. I hope you'll be very happy, he said gruffly. Oh, piggy-wig, cried the pussycat, drying her tears. Now we most certainly shall be. Your wedding present is the one thing that we needed, the one thing without which it is not possible to dine on mince and slices of quince. Oh, pussy, my love, said the owl, looking in puzzlement at the piggy-wig's present. What is it? You elegant fowl, laughed the pussycat joyfully. It's a runcible spoon.
Dumpling. Oh, how I long to belong, said Dumpling. Who do you want to belong to? Asked one of her brothers. No, I don't mean to belong, said Dumpling. I mean be-long. When the 3 dachshund puppies had been born, they had looked much like pups of any other breed. Then, as they became older, the 2 brothers began to grow long, as dachshunds do. Their noses moved further and further away from their tail tips. But the 3rd puppy stayed short and stumpy. How long you are getting, said the lady who owned them all to the 2 brothers. She called one of them Joker, because he was always playing silly games, and the other one Thinker, because he liked to sit and think deeply. Then she looked at their sister and shook her head. You are nice and healthy, she said. Your eyes are bright, and your coat is shining, and you're good and plump. But dachshunds are supposed to have long bodies, you know, and you haven't. You're just a little dumpling. Dumpling asked her mother about the problem. Will I ever grow really long like Joker and Thinker? She asked. Her mother looked at her plump daughter and sighed. Time will tell, she said. Dumpling asked her brother Joker. Joker, she said, how can I grow longer? That's easy, Dumpy, said Joker. I'll hold your nose, and Thinker will hold your tail, and we'll stretch you. "Don't be silly, Joker," said Thinker. Thinker was a serious puppy. He did not like to play jokes. "It would hurt Dumpy if we did that."
"Well then, what shall I do, Thinker?"
asked Dumpling. Thinker thought deeply. Then he said, "Try going for long walks, and it helps if you take very long steps." So Dumpling set off the next morning. All the dachshunds were out in the garden. The puppy's mother was snoozing in the sunshine. Joker was playing a silly game, pretending that a stick was a snake. Thinker was sitting and thinking deeply. Dumpling slipped away through a hole in the hedge. Next to the garden was a wood, and she set off between the trees on her very short legs. She stepped out boldly, trying hard to imagine herself growing a tiny bit longer with each step. Suddenly, she bumped into a large black cat, which was sitting under a yew tree.
"Oh, I beg your pardon,"
said Dumpling.
"Granted,"
said the cat.
"Where are you going?" "Oh, nowhere special. I'm just taking a long walk. You see, I'm trying to grow longer."
And she went on to explain about dachshunds and how they should look.
"Everyone calls me Dumpling," she said sadly. "I wish I could be long." "Granted," said the black cat again. "What do you mean?" she said. "Can you make me long?" "Easy as winking," said the cat, winking. "I'm a witch's cat. I'll cast a spell on you. How long do you want to be?"
"Oh, very, very long," cried Dumpling excitedly. "The longest dachshund ever." The black cat stared at her with his green eyes, and then he shut them and began to chant.
"Abracadabra, hark to my song. It will make you very long."
The sound of the cat's voice died away, and the wood was suddenly very still. Then the cat gave himself a shake and opened his eyes.
"Remember," he said, "you asked for it."
"Oh, thank you," said Dumpling.
"I feel longer already. Will I see you again?" "I shouldn't wonder,"
said the cat. Dumpling set off back towards the garden. The feeling of growing longer was lovely. She wagged her tail madly, and each wag seemed a little further away than the last. She thought how surprised Joker and Thinker would be. She would be much longer than them.
"Dumpling indeed," she said. "I will have to have a new name now, a very long one to match my new body."
But then she began to find walking difficult. Her front feet knew where they were going, but her back feet acted very oddly. They seemed to be a long way behind her. They kept tripping over things and dropping into rabbit holes. They kept getting stuck among the bushes. She couldn't see her tail, so she went round a big tree to look for it, and met it on the other side. By now, she was wriggling on her tummy like a snake.
"Help!"
yapped Dumpling at the top of her voice.
"Cat! Come back, please!" "Granted,"
said the witch's cat, appearing suddenly beside her.
"What's the trouble now?"
"Oh, please," cried Dumpling,
"undo your spell." "Some people are never satisfied,"
said the cat. Once more he stared at her with his green eyes. Then he shut them and began to chant.
"Abracadabra, hear my song. It will make you short, not long."
Dumpling never forgot how wonderful it felt as her back feet came towards her front ones and her tummy rose from the ground. She hurried homewards and squeezed her nice, comfortable, short, stumpy body through the hole in the hedge. Joker and Thinker came galloping across the grass towards her. How clumsy they looked, she thought, with those silly long bodies.
"Where have you been, Dumpy?"
shouted Joker. Did the exercise make you longer? Asked Tinker.
No, said Dumpling, but as a matter of fact, I'm quite happy as I am now. And that's about the long and the short of it.
Goldie Pig and the Three Bears. Goldie Pig was a very inquisitive little swine, always poking her snout into other people's business. Rooting about in the forest one day, she came upon a house among the trees.
I wonder who lives there,
said Goldie Pig, and when she had called,
hello,
and no one had answered, she pushed open the door and went in. The first thing she saw was a table with 3 chairs around it, one big, one ordinary-sized, one little, and on the table in front of each chair was a bowl of porridge, one big, one ordinary-sized, one little. Goldie Pig scoffed the lot. Then, nosy as ever, she trotted upstairs. There in a bedroom were 3 beds, one big, one ordinary-sized, one little.
I'll have a nap,
said Goldie Pig, feeling rather full. She tried each bed in turn. The first was too little, the second too ordinary, but the third, the big bed, was just right. So Goldie Pig snuggled down and went to sleep. Shortly afterwards, the owners of the house returned. They had been taking a walk to work up an appetite for breakfast. They were, in fact, 3 bears, one big, one ordinary-sized, one little.
Who's been sitting on our chairs?
Said the little bear. And where's our porridge gone? Said the ordinary-sized bear. And who, said the big bear, listening carefully, is that snoring upstairs? Very quietly, the 3 bears climbed to the bedroom and looked in and saw Goldie Pig.
She's messed up all our beds,
said the little bear.
After eating all our porridge,
said the ordinary-sized bear. And so, said the big bear, we'll jolly well eat her. At that, Goldie Pig let out an enormous squeal, dashed past the bears, and rushed downstairs and away. So you can see, the 3 of them got neither porridge nor ham for their breakfast.
The Spelling Bee. For weeks Noah's Ark had been sailing about on the great waters of the flood, and the animals were getting very bored. Noah noticed this. They haven't got enough to do, he said to Mrs. Noah. They need to use their brains. We'll have a competition. What sort of competition? Said Mrs. Noah. Noah thought for a bit, and then he said, a spelling competition. We're going to have a spelling competition, he told all the animals, to see who is the cleverest among you. Who would like to take part? One of the 2 elephants pushed forward. I am the biggest animal in the ark, it said, so it stands to reason that I must be the cleverest. What do you want me to spell? Your name, said Noah. That's easy, said the elephant. E-L-L. Stop, said Noah. I'm afraid you're spelling that wrong. Next, please. I am the tallest animal in the ark, said one of the 2 giraffes, so it stands to reason that I must be the cleverest. What do you want me to spell? Your name, said Noah. That's easy, said the giraffe. J-I-R. Hold it, said Noah. I'm afraid you're spelling that wrong. Next, please. I have the thickest skin of any of the animals in the ark, said one of the 2 rhinoceroses, so it stands to reason that I must be the cleverest. What do you want me to spell? Your name, said Noah again. "That's easy," said the rhinoceros. R-I-N... Hang on, said Noah. "I'm afraid you're spelling that wrong. Next, please." Then one of the two monkeys scampered up. "I must be the cleverest," it said. "The others didn't know what you wanted them to spell, but I do. You want me to spell my name." "Go on, then," said Noah. "It couldn't be simpler," said the monkey. M-U-N... "Whoa!" said Noah. "You're wrong, too. In fact, it's beginning to look as though there isn't one animal that can spell its name correctly. Would anyone else like to have a try?" At that moment, one of the two bees on board the ark came flying along and chanced to land on Noah's hand. "Aha!" said Noah. "Here's someone else wanting to take part in our competition." "Oh, me?" said the bee. "Yes, you," said Noah. "But I'm no good at spelling," said the bee. "Oh, go on," said Noah. "Have a try. Tell us how you spell your name." "My name?" said the bee. "Yes." "Bee?" said the bee. "Yes," cried Noah. "That's right, bee. Go on." The bee sat silent, so Noah gave it a little pinch to encourage it. "Ee!" cried the bee. "Yes," said Noah. "Ee! Keep going." And he gave it another little pinch. "Ee!" cried the bee again. "That's it!" shouted Noah. "You've done it! B-E-E! You and you alone have spelt your name correctly. So you must be the cleverest animal in the ark." "Who? Me?" said the bee. "Yes, you," said Noah. "So you can buzz off now." And then everybody, except the elephant and the giraffe and the rhinoceros and the monkey, gave 3 hearty cheers for the clever little bee. Dinosaur School. Little Basil Brontosaurus came home from his first morning at play school in floods of tears. "Whatever's the matter, darling?" said his mother, whose name was Araminta. "Why are you crying?" "They've been teasing me," sobbed Basil. "Who have? The other children?" A variety of little dinosaurs went to the play school. There were diplodocuses, iguanodons, ankylosauruses, and many others. Basil was the only young brontosaurus. "Yes," sniffed Basil. "They said I was stupid. They said I hadn't got a brain in my head." At this point, Basil's father, a 40-ton brontosaurus who measured 27 metres from nose to tail tip, came lumbering up through the shallows of the lake in which the family lived. "Herb," called Araminta, "did you hear that? The kids at play school said our Basil hadn't a brain in his head." Herb considered this while pulling up and swallowing large amounts of waterweed. "He has," he said at last. "Hasn't he?" "Course you have, darling," said Araminta to her little son. "Come along with me now and dry your tears and listen carefully." Still snivelling, Basil waded into the lake. He followed his mother to a quiet spot well away from the other dinosaurs that were feeding around the shallows. Araminta settled herself where the water was deep enough to help support her enormous bulk. "Now listen to Mummy, Basil darling," she said. "What I'm about to tell you is a secret. Every brontosaurus that ever hatched is told this secret by his or her mummy or daddy once he or she is old enough. One day you'll be grown up, and you'll have a wife of your own, and she'll lay eggs, and then you'll have babies, and when those babies are old enough, they'll have to be told. Just like I'm going to tell you." "Tell me what?" said Basil. "Promise not to breathe a word of it to the other children." "All right, but what is it?" "It is this," said Araminta. "We have 2 brains." "You're joking," said Basil. "I'm not. Every brontosaurus has 2 brains, one in its head and one in the middle of its back." "Wow!" cried Basil. "Well, if I've got 2 brains and all the other kids have only got 1, I must be twice as clever as them." "You are, darling," said Araminta. "You are. So let's have no more of this crybaby nonsense. Next time one of the children teases you, just think to yourself, I'm twice as clever as you." Not only did Basil think this next morning at play school, but he also thought that he was twice as big as the other children. "Did you have a nice time?" said Araminta when he came home. "Smashing," said Basil. "No tears?" "Not mine," said Basil cheerily. "You didn't tell anyone our secret?" "Oh, no," said Basil. "I didn't do much talking to the other kids. Actions speak louder than words." Not long after this, the play-school teacher, an elderly female stegosaurus, came to see Herb and Araminta. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, "but I'm a little worried about Basil." "Not been blubbing again, has he?" said Herb. "Oh, no, he hasn't," said the stegosaurus. "In fact, recently he has grown greatly in confidence. At first he was rather nervous, and the other children tended to make fun of him, but they don't any more. He's twice the boy he was." "Can't think why," said Herb, but Araminta could. "Indeed," went on the stegosaurus, "I fear that lately he's been throwing his weight about. Boys will be boys, I know, but really Basil has become very rough. Only yesterday I had to send home a baby brachiosaurus with a badly bruised foot and a little trachodon with a black eye. I should be glad if you would speak to Basil about all this." When the teacher had departed, Araminta said to Herb, "You must have a word with the boy." "Why?" said Herb. "You heard what the teacher said. He's been bullying the other children. He's obviously getting above himself." At this point Basil appeared. "What did old Steggy want?" he said. "Tell him, Herb," said Araminta. "Now look here, my boy," said Herb. Basil looked. "You listen to me." Basil listened. But Herb, Araminta could see, had forgotten what he was talking about. "Your father's very angry with you," she said. "You've been fighting at play school." "That's right," said Herb. "Fighting at play school. Why?" "Well, it's like this, Dad," said Basil. "The first day the other kids teased me. They said I hadn't got a brain in my head, remember? And then Mum told me I had, and another in the middle of my back. 2 brains! So I thought I'm twice as clever as the rest, as well as twice as big, so why not lean on them a bit? Not my fault if they get under my feet." "You want to watch your step," said Herb. "Daddy's right," said Araminta. "One of these days you'll get into real trouble. Now run along. I want to talk to your father." "It's all my fault for telling him about having 2 brains," she said when Basil had gone. "He's too young. My parents didn't tell me till I was nearly grown up. How did you find out?" "Well, I don't know," said Herb. "I dare say I heard some of the chaps talking down in the swamp. When I was one of the gang, we used to talk a lot down in the swamp." "What about?" said Araminta. "Waterweed, mostly," said Herb, and he pulled up a great mouthful and began to chomp. Not long after this, Basil was expelled. "I'm sorry," said the elderly stegosaurus, "but I can't have the boy in my class any longer. It isn't only his roughness, it's his rudeness. Do you know what he said to me today?" "No," said Herb. "What?" said Araminta. "He said to me, 'I'm twice as clever as you are.'" "Is he?" said Herb. "Of course he isn't," said Araminta hastily. "He was just being silly and childish." "I'm sure he won't be any trouble in the future." "Not in my play school he won't," said the stegosaurus. And then, oddly, she used the very words that Araminta had used earlier. "One of these days," she said, "he'll get into real trouble." And off she waddled, flapping her back plates angrily. And one of those days, Basil did. Being expelled from play school hadn't worried him at all. "What do I want with other dinosaurs?" he thought. "I'm far superior to them with my 2 brains. One to work my neck and my front legs, one to work my back legs and my tail. Brontosauruses are twice as clever as other dinosaurs, and I'm twice as clever as any other brontosaurus." You couldn't say that Basil was big-headed, for that was almost the smallest part of him, but you could certainly say that he was boastful, conceited, and arrogant. "That boy," said Araminta to Herb, "is boastful, conceited, and arrogant. He must get it from your side of the family, swaggering about and picking fights all the time. What does he think he is? A Tyrannosaurus Rex? What do you think you are?" Basil was saying at that very moment. He had come out of the lake where the family spent almost all their time and set off for a walk. He was ambling along, thinking what a fine fellow he was, when suddenly he saw a strange, smallish dinosaur standing in his path. It was not like any dinosaur he had ever seen before. It stood upright on its hind legs, which were much bigger than its little forelegs, and it had a large head with large jaws and a great many teeth. But compared to Basil, who already weighed a couple of tons, it looked quite small, and he advanced upon it, saying in a rude tone, "What do you think you are?" "I'm a Tyrannosaurus Rex," said the stranger. "Never heard of you," said Basil. "Lucky you." "Why, what's so wonderful about you? You can't even walk on 4 feet like a decent dinosaur, and you've only got 1 brain. You'll be telling me next that you don't eat waterweed like we do." "We don't," said the other. "We only eat meat." "What sort of meat?" brontosaurus, mostly. Let's get this straight, said Basil. Are you seriously telling me that you kill brontosauruses and eat them? Yes. Don't make me laugh, said Basil. I'm 4 times as big as you. Yes, said the youngster, but my dad's 4 times as big as you. Oh, look, what a bit of luck. Here he comes. Basil looked up to see a terrifying sight. Marching towards him on its huge hind legs was a towering full-grown Tyrannosaurus Rex with a mouthful of long, razor-sharp teeth. All of a sudden, Basil had 2 brainwaves. Time I went, he thought, sharpish, and as one brain sent a message rippling along to the other, he turned tail and made for the safety of the lake as fast as his legs could carry him. This was not very fast, as Basil's big body made him slow and clumsy on land. If the Tyrannosaurus had been really hungry, he would have caught Basil without any trouble. As it was, Basil reached the shore of the lake just in time and splashed frantically out to deeper water, where his parents, their long necks outstretched, were browsing on the weedy bottom. Araminta was the first to look up. "Hello, darling," she said. "Where have you been?" "Whatever's the matter? You're all of a doodah." "Oh, Mummy, Mummy," panted Basil. "It was awful. I went for a walk and I was nearly eaten by a Tyrannosaurus Rex." Herb raised his head in time to hear this. "I'll teach you," he said. "Teach me what, Dad?" "Not to be so cocky," said Araminta. "Ever since I told you that secret, you've been unbearable, Basil. I hope this will be a lesson to you." "Oh, it will, Mummy, it will," cried Basil. "I won't ever shoot my mouth off again." "Don't go for walks," said his mother, "but keep close to the lake where you'll be safe from the Tyrannosaurus." "In case he wrecks you," said Herb, and plunged his head under water again while strings of bubbles rose as he laughed at his own joke. "And if you want to grow up to be as big as your father," said Araminta, "there's one thing you must always remember to do." "What's that, Mummy?" said Basil. "Use your brains."
The Ugly Duckling. An ordinary farmyard duck once hatched out a brood of ordinary ducklings. But when they were all free of their eggshells and scuttering about as newborn ducklings do, there was still one egg left in the nest. It was a much bigger egg than the others had been, and the duck continued doggedly to sit upon it, hoping that it too would hatch, which, some days later, it did. Soon the duck could see that this last child was unlike his brothers and sisters. He was larger, he was greyish where they were yellow, and his legs and feet were bigger, and his neck much longer than theirs. The duck thought him quite beautiful, and proud mother that she was, she constantly told him so. "You, my son," she said, day in, day out, "are beautiful. Your brothers and sisters are healthy, normal, ordinary ducklings, but you alone are beautiful." And she constantly showed him off to the other birds in the farmyard, the hens and the geese and the turkeys. "Look at him," the old duck said to them day in, day out. "Is he not the most beautiful duckling you ever set eyes on?" Not surprisingly, after all this constant flattery, the beautiful duckling grew up to be extremely big-headed. He would stand by the duck pond and look at his reflection and say to himself, "Observe my noble body, and my powerful wings, and my great webbed feet, and my long and elegant neck. What a truly beautiful duckling I am." And at last, to cap it all, his plumage, which had been grey, turned to a brilliant, snowy whiteness. One day, the beautiful duckling left the duck pond and made his way to a nearby lake. Here he stood by the water's edge and looked once more at his reflection. "Without doubt," he said, "I must be the most beautiful duckling in the world. No other could compare with me." Then he looked up and saw a whole flock of great white birds swimming on the surface of the lake. Birds that looked just like him, birds that certainly could compare with him. "Even so, they cannot be as beautiful as I," he said to himself, and he swam proudly out to meet them. At the sight of this stranger approaching, the swans banded together, arching their wings and hissing angrily. "Who are you?" they cried, and the reply came, "Make way! I am the beautiful duckling." "Duckling?" said one of the swans to the rest, and "He's mad," said another. "And he's a big head," said a third, and then a host of voices said, "Let's duck the duckling!" And with that, all the swans set upon the newcomer. They buffeted him with their wings, and pecked at him, and pulled out his tail feathers, and finally they ducked his head under water. Somehow he struggled back to the duck pond, and saw the old duck who had hatched him so long ago, but now did not recognize the battered, muddied bird, his neck limp, his wings trailing, his plumage all in dirty disarray. "Who on earth are you?" she said. "The beautiful duckling," he gasped. "A duckling you may be," said the old duck doubtfully, "but beautiful you are not. Sure as eggs is eggs. There's only one word to describe you. Ugly." The Great Sloth Race. Dozy was a two-fingered tree sloth. On his feet he had 3 toes, but on each hand only 2 fingers. Snoozy was a 3-fingered tree sloth. He also had 3 toes, but he had 3 fingers on each hand. All tree sloths spend their lives upside down in the forests of South America. They are born upside down, they live upside down, and the only time they ever touch the ground is when they die, upside down, and fall off their perches. Always they are facing the sky, so that they see only the tops of the trees, and when it rains, only their tummies get wet. Dozy and Snoozy were quite different, and not just because Snoozy had more fingers. Dozy was grumpy. He had a bad-tempered expression. He would bite and slash with his sharp claws. Snoozy was gentle. On his face he wore what looked like a smile. He only waved his arms about and never bit anyone. Dozy was brownish. Snoozy was silvery. Dozy was boastful. Snoozy was modest. Where they were alike was in the way they moved, and not just because it was upside down, it was also very, very slow. All tree sloths are slow, but Dozy and Snoozy were among the slowest sloths in the whole of South America. Snoozy didn't mind this. "Nice and easy does it," he would say gently to himself, as very, very slowly he reached out with one 3-fingered hand to pull himself forward. Dozy did mind. "Get a move on," he would say grumpily to himself, as very, very slowly he reached out and pulled himself forward with one 2-fingered hand. The other creatures of the forest made fun of Dozy and Snoozy. The brightly coloured macaws screeched with laughter at the tree sloths, and the monkeys hung by their tails right in front of the noses of Dozy and Snoozy and shouted, "Slow coach!" at them. Dozy slashed at them angrily, but Snoozy only waved his arms about, while on his face he wore what looked like a smile. One day, by chance, Dozy and Snoozy met. Snoozy was hanging under a branch having a nap when Dozy came crawling along, upside down of course, and very, very slowly, underneath the same branch. "Hey, you!" said Dozy loudly. "Get out of my way!" Snoozy woke up. "Oh, sorry," he said softly, and he began to reverse. Now, a sloth going backwards moves very, very, very slowly indeed, and while Dozy was waiting, he noticed Snoozy's hands. "He's got 3 fingers on each, he thought. Stuck-up creature. Snoozy noticed that Dozy had only 2 fingers on each hand. Poor chap, he thought.
I suppose you think you're better than me,
said Dozy. Better, said Snoozy. How do you mean?
I suppose you think you're faster than me because you've got extra fingers.
Oh, no, said Snoozy. I shouldn't think so.
We'll see,
said Dozy.
I challenge you to a race.
By now, Snoozy had reversed far enough to reach another nearby branch and thus get out of Dozy's way. He didn't want to race anyone, least of all this bad-tempered sloth. But the monkeys had been listening, and they told the macaws, and the macaws flew all round the forest, spreading the news. "The Great Sloth Race!" they screeched. Roll up everybody, to see the Great Sloth Race!" There was no way now, it seemed to Snoozy, that he could escape having to race Dozy. It took a long time, of course, before all was ready, but at last Dozy and Snoozy were hanging upside down on 2 long branches that ran parallel to one another. Then the judge, an old and wise toucan, opened his enormous beak and called,
Ready, steady, go!
Very, very slowly, one with a 2-fingered hand, one with a 3-fingered, Dozy and Snoozy reached out to pull themselves forward. After an hour, they had travelled about halfway along their branches. Dozy was slightly ahead. Many of the animals of the forest who were watching had become bored and had flown or run or crawled or hopped away. After 2 hours, Dozy was well ahead and nearing the end of his branch. By now, everyone had become fed up with so slow a race, and all had gone away, except the judge. After 3 hours, Dozy reached the end of his branch. Opening his enormous beak, the toucan called,
Stop! The race is over!
Snoozy stopped.
Told you so,
shouted Dozy.
I got to the end first. I was faster than him, even though I've only got 2 toes on each hand, and he's got 3. I've won the race!
The old wise toucan flew down and landed beside Snoozy.
Oh dear, he said softly. I should have explained the rules to Dozy. I'm afraid he went too fast. The object of a sloth race is to see who can go the slower. Congratulations, Snoozy. You are the winner.
Upside down as always, Snoozy looked up at the toucan. On his face, he wore what looked like a smile. Bless you. Bless you was a very small elephant when he sneezed for the first time. The herd was moving slowly through the tall elephant grass, so tall that it hid the legs of his mother and his aunties, and reached halfway up the bodies of his bigger brothers and sisters. But you couldn't see Bless you at all. Down below where he was walking, the air was thick with pollen from the flowering elephant grasses, and suddenly Bless you felt a strange tickly feeling at the base of his very small trunk. Shutting his eyes and closing his mouth, he stuck his very small trunk straight out before him and sneezed. Achoo! It wasn't the biggest sneeze in the world, but it was very big for a very small elephant. Bless you! Cried his mother and his aunties and his bigger brothers and sisters. For a moment, Bless you looked rather cowed. He did not know what they meant. and he thought he might have done something naughty. He hung his head, and his ears drooped. But the herd moved on through the tall elephant grass without taking any further notice of him, so he soon forgot to be unhappy. Before long, Bless You gave another sneeze, and another, and another, and each time he sneezed, his mother and his aunties and his bigger brothers and sisters cried, "Bless you!" They did not say this to any of the other elephants, Bless You noticed, because none of the other elephants sneezed, so he thought, "That must be my name." At last, the herd came out of the tall elephant grass and went down to the river to drink and to bathe, and Bless You stopped sneezing. "Poor baby," said his mother, touching the top of his hairy little head gently with the tip of her trunk. "You've got awful hay fever." "And what a sneeze he's got," said one of his aunties. "It's not the biggest sneeze in the world, but it's very big for a very small elephant." The months passed, and Bless You grew, very slowly, as elephants do. But so did his hay fever. Worse and worse it got, and more he sneezed as the herd moved through the tall elephant grass. Every few minutes, Bless You would shut his eyes and close his mouth and stick his very small trunk straight out before him and sneeze. "Achoo!" And each time he sneezed, his mother and his aunties and his bigger brothers and sisters cried, "Bless you!" But though Bless You was not growing very fast, one bit of him was. It was his trunk. All that sneezing was stretching it. Soon he had to carry it tightly curled up, so as not to trip on it. "Poor baby," said his mother. "At this rate, your trunk will soon be as long as mine." But Bless You only answered, "Achoo!" "Don't worry, my dear," said one of his aunties. "The longer the better, I should think. He'll be able to reach higher up into the trees than any elephant ever has, and he'll be able to go deeper into the river, using his trunk as a snorkel." "Ah, well," said Bless You's mother, "soon the elephant grass will finish flowering, and the poor little chap will stop sneezing." And it did. And he did. The years passed, and each year brought the season of the flowering of the elephant grasses that shed their pollen and made Bless You sneeze. And each sneeze stretched that trunk of his just a little bit further. By the time he was 5 years old, he could reach as high into the trees and go as deep into the river, using his trunk as a snorkel, as his mother and his aunties. By the time he was 10 years old, he could reach higher and go deeper. And by the time Bless You was 20 years old and had grown a fine pair of tusks, he had, without doubt, the longest trunk of any elephant in the whole of Africa. And now, in the season of the flowering of the elephant grasses, what a sneeze he had! Shutting his eyes and closing his mouth, he stuck his amazingly long trunk straight out before him and sneezed. "Achoo!" Woe betide anything that got in the way of that sneeze. Young trees were uprooted, birds were blown whirling into the sky, small animals like antelope and gazelle were bowled over and over, larger creatures such as zebra and wildebeest stampeded in panic before that mighty blast, and even the king of beasts took care to be out of the line of fire of the biggest sneeze in the world. So, if ever you should be in Africa when the elephant grass is in flower, and should chance to see a great tusker with the longest trunk you could possibly imagine, keep well away and watch and listen. You will see that great tusker shut his eyes and close his mouth and stick his fantastically, unbelievably, impossibly long trunk straight out before him, and you will hear, "Achoo!" And then, you know what to say, don't you?
bless you.
Hogel and Gruntle. Once upon a time there were two little piglets, brother and sister, called Hogel and Gruntle. They were very unhappy, for their mother had died, and their step-sow was not kind to them, so they ran away into the forest. They walked and walked, trotter in trotter, until they were exhausted, and it seemed that they must die from hunger. But suddenly they came upon a little house all made of gingerbread, with windows of transparent sugar. "Saved!" cried Hogel, and he tore off a piece of the roof and stuffed it in his mouth, while Gruntle helped herself to a window pane. Just then an ancient crone appeared from inside the little house. "Come in, little pigs," she cried. "You are hungry, I can see, so I will heat up the oven and stick you both in it," she thought. "Nothing nicer than roast pork." So Hogel and Gruntle went inside, and the old crone heated up the oven. "See if it's hot enough," she said, "and then I'll push you both in," she thought. "We're not tall enough to see into the oven," said Hogel, and "You have a look," said Gruntle, and when the old crone did, they pushed her in and shut the oven door. While she was cooking, Hogel and Gruntle polished off all the rest of the little gingerbread house, and its sugar windows too. All that was left standing was the oven, from which came a strong smell of cooking crone. "I'm full," said Gruntle at last. "Me too," said Hogel. "What about her?" said Gruntle. "I couldn't eat another thing," said Hogel. So they left her to stew in her own juice.
The SEPTOPUS. From the moment he was born, Conrad believed himself to be an octopus. His mother was an octopus. His father was an octopus. All his many brothers and sisters were octopuses. Conrad had no idea that he was different until the day of the passing out parade. Conrad's father was a rather strict octopus, and before his children left home to go and seek their fortunes in the great wide ocean, he always inspected them. He lined them up, girls on the right, boys on the left.
"Present!
Arms!" he shouted, and at this command they all held out their long sucker-covered tentacles. Then he swam slowly backwards, as octopuses do, along the line, stopping before each child, his large, unwinking eyes fixed upon its 8 arms. Satisfied, to each in turn he gave the order, "Dismiss!" and each jetted off, as octopuses do, into the wild blue yonder, waving goodbye with all its arms. Last in the line was Conrad.
"Present! Arms!"
barked his father, and Conrad held them out. His father changed colour, as octopuses do. He turned a dark red.
"Come and look at this,"
he called to his wife. She came and looked. She turned a bright blue. "Oh, no," she whispered. "He can't be."
"Oh, yes,"
growled her husband.
"he is."
And then, instead of
"Dismiss,"
he shouted,
"Disgrace."
Conrad turned pale. "Please, father, please, mother," he said. "What is the matter?" "Oh, Conrad," said his mother sadly, "you have only 7 arms."
"You,"
said his father angrily,
"are a SEPTOPUS."
and then they each let out a cloud of black ink, as octopuses do, and jetted hastily away. So ashamed was Conrad that for a long time he steered clear of all other octopuses. But he was a growing boy, and like most grown boys, he was always hungry. 7 arms, he found, were still plenty for grabbing hold of crabs and lobsters, as octopuses do, and stuffing them into his mouth, and he grew quickly. But still, whenever he saw another octopus, he jetted off backwards as fast as he could. Till one day, because he wasn't looking where he was going, he bumped straight into something. Turning round, he saw that it was not only another octopus, but a female, and a pretty one at that. Conrad blushed bright red.
"Oh, sorry,"
he gasped.
"Oh!"
cried the female angrily.
"Not another one!"
Another one? Thought Conrad. Does she mean I'm not the only septopus? Are there other septopuses in the sea?
"Another what?"
he asked.
"Another pushy boy," she said. "Barging into a girl like that. Next thing you'll be putting an arm round me, and then the other 7.
"Oh, no," said Conrad. "I couldn't."
"You're all the same," the pretty female went on. "Always trying to cuddle a girl. Can't keep your arms to yourselves. When I want a cuddle, I'll ask for it. And anyway, what do you mean you couldn't? Am I ugly or something?"
"Oh, no," said Conrad.
"You're beautiful."
At this, the female octopus turned a delicate shade of pink.
"Do you think so?"
she said.
"Yes, I do," said Conrad. "And I'd very much like to put 8 arms around you, but I couldn't. You see, I'm sorry to say that I've only got 7. I'm not an octopus. I'm a septopus. I was born like that." "Oh, you poor boy," said the female. "What's your name?"
"Conrad."
"I like that. And I like you, Conrad. You're not pretty like the rest. And you mustn't worry about only having 7 arms. It makes you different from any boy I've ever met. By the way, I'm called Camilla. How do you do?"
Camilla held out one arm, and Conrad grasped it with one of his, gently.
"I'm very well, thank you," he said. "In fact, at this moment, I'm the happiest septopus in the sea." "You're probably the only septopus in the sea," said Camilla. "And you're certainly the nicest. Give me a cuddle."
Carefully, Conrad wrapped his 7 arms around her.
"Oh, Camilla," he said, "now that I've found you, I'll never let you go."
And then, arm in arm, they happily jetted away together.
Naughty Boy. Hilda was an old-fashioned sort of animal. She did not hold with the free and easy ways of the modern hedgehog, and even preferred to call herself by the old name of Hedge Pig. She planned to bring up her 7 hedge piglets very strictly. "Children shall be seen and not heard," was one of her favourite sayings, and "speak when you're spoken to" was another. She taught them to say please and thank you, to eat nicely, to sniff quietly if their noses were running, and never to scratch in public, no matter how many fleas they had. 6 of them, 3 boys and 3 girls, grew up to be well behaved with beautiful manners, but the 7th was a great worry to Hilda and her husband Herbert. This 7th hedge piglet was indeed the despair of Hilda's life. He was not only seen but constantly heard, speaking whether he was spoken to or not, and he never said please or thank you. He gobbled his food in a revolting, slobbery way. He sniffed very loudly indeed, and he was forever scratching. His real name was Norton, but he was more often known as Naughty. Now, some mother animals can wallop their young ones if they do not do what they are told. A lioness can cuff her cub, a monkey can clip its child round the ear, or an elephant can give her baby a biff with her trunk, but it's not so easy for hedgehogs. "Sometimes," said Hilda to Herbert, "I wish that hedge pigs didn't have prickles." "Why's that, my dear?" said Herbert. "Because then I could give our Naughty a good hiding. He deserves it." "Why's that, my dear?" said Herbert. "Not only is he disobedient, he has taken to answering me back." "Why can't he be good like the others? Never have I known such a hedge piglet. I shall be glad when November comes." "Why's that, my dear?" said Herbert. Hilda sighed. "Conversation with my husband," she said to herself for the umpteenth time, "can hardly be called interesting. Because then it's time to hibernate, of course, and we can all have a good sleep. For 5 blissful months I shall not have to listen to that impudent, squeaky little voice, arguing, complaining, refusing to do what I say, and generally giving me cheek." Hilda should have known it would not be that easy. When November came, she said to her husband and the 7 children, "Come along, all of you." "Yes, Mummy," said the 3 good boys and 3 good girls. "And why's that, my dear?" said Herbert. But Naughty only said, "Shan't." "Naughty," said Hilda, "if you do not do what you are told, I shall get your father to give you a good hard smack." Naughty fluffed up his spines and sniggered. "You'll be sorry if you do, Dad," he said. "Where are we going, Mummy?" asked one of the hedge piglets. "We are going to find a nice deep bed of dry leaves where we can hibernate." "What does hibernate mean, Mummy?" asked another. "It means to go to sleep all through the winter. When it's rainy and blowy and frosty and snowy outside, we shall all be fast asleep under the leaf pile, all cosy and warm. Won't that be lovely?" "No," said Naughty. "Norton," said his mother angrily, "are you coming or are you not?" "No," said Naughty. "Oh, well, stay here then," snapped Hilda, "and freeze to death," and she trotted off with the rest. In a far corner of the garden they found a nice deep bed of dry leaves, and Hilda and Herbert and the 6 good hedge piglets butted their way into it and curled up tight and shut their eyes and went to sleep. The following April they woke up and opened their eyes and uncurled and buttered out into the spring sunshine. "Goodbye, Mummy, goodbye, Daddy," chorused the 6 good hedge piglets, and off they trotted to seek their fortunes. "Oh, Herbert," said Hilda, "I feel so sad." "Why's that, my dear?" said Herbert. "I should never have left our Naughty out in the cold last November. He will have frozen to death, poor little fellow. What does it matter that he was rude and disobedient and cheeky? Oh, if only I could hear his squeaky voice again, I'd be the happiest hedge pig ever." At that moment there was a rustling from the other side of the bed of leaves, and out came Naughty. "Can't you keep your voices down?" he said, yawning. "Fellow can't get a wink of sleep." "Naughty," cried Hilda, "you did hibernate after all." "Course I did," said Naughty. "What do you expect me to do, freeze to death?" "Oh, my naughty boy," said Hilda. "Are you all right?" "I was," said Naughty, "till you woke me nattering on as usual." Now, said Hilda, controlling herself with difficulty, "that's not the way to speak to your mother, is it? Come here and give me a kiss." "Don't want to," said Naughty. "Anyone would think," said Hilda, "that you weren't pleased to see us." "Anyone," said Naughty, "will be right." "Well, push off then," shouted Hilda. "Your brothers and sisters have all gone, so get lost." "Shan't," said Naughty. He yawned again, full in his mother's face. "I'll go back to bed," he said. "So there." At this, Hilda completely lost her temper. "I've had enough," she screamed. "You're the rudest hedge pig in the world, and your father's the most boring, and I never want to see either of you again." And she ran away as fast as she could go. Herbert and Naughty stared after her. Naughty scratched his fleas and sniffed very noisily. "Looks like she's done a bunk, Dad," he said. "Yes," said Herbert. "Why's that, my dear?" "Can't think," said Naughty. "Then she always was prickly."
The Princess and the Pig. A beautiful princess was one day walking along a country road when she saw a large pig sitting on the grass verge. Being of a kindly nature, she stopped to speak to it. "Hello, Piggy," she said with a smile.
"Hi," said the pig, "though actually I'm a handsome youth. I upset the local witch, with the results you can see."
"What did you say to her?"
asked the princess. "I called her a dirty, smelly, ugly, evil old bag," said the pig. "So she put a spell on me. Only a kiss from a beautiful princess can change things now," she said, and off she went, cackling with laughter.
"Oh," said the princess. She looked at the pig doubtfully, but then, because she was of a kindly nature, she bent down and, shutting her eyes and screwing up her courage, planted a kiss on the end of the pig's rubbery snout. Immediately, the princess also turned into a pig.
Zap! Of all the chameleons in Africa, Kenneth was the most unhappy. He couldn't change colour. Kenneth could do all the other clever things that chameleons do. He could walk along a thin branch, holding it with 2 fingers of each hand. He could roll his eyes in different directions at the same time. He could shoot out his long sticky tongue and sometimes zap a fly. But his brothers and his sisters and his friends could do the cleverest thing of all. They could change the colour of their skins. If they sat on a greenish leaf, they turned greenish. If they sat on a reddish flower, they turned reddish. If they sat on yellowish sand, they turned yellowish. But Kenneth always stayed the same colour, a sort of muddy brown. However hard he tried, he didn't seem to be able to get the hang of changing. He was always muddy brown. So he could only zap flies when he sat on brown mud. So he didn't zap many flies. He was the most unhappy chameleon in Africa. One day, Kenneth was sitting on a leaf trying to zap flies. The leaf was silvery, so the flies could see him easily, and one after another they buzzed off laughing. "Oh dear," said Kenneth, rolling his tongue back up after the 15th miss. "What's the trouble?" said a voice, and Kenneth looked round. There on the next branch was a pretty young female chameleon whose name was Kiki. Kenneth sighed. "I'm feeling blue," he said. "You don't look it," said Kiki. "Why do you stay muddy brown on a silvery leaf?" Kenneth was ashamed. He rolled his eyes in different directions. "I can't change," he said. "All my brothers and sisters and friends can change colour, but I can't get the hang of it. I wish I could. I'm green with envy." "You don't look it," said Kiki again. "But," she said softly, "I'll tell you what you do look." "What?" "You look very handsome." Kenneth felt terribly embarrassed. "There," she cried. "You can do it." Kenneth kept one eye on Kiki and rolled the other one backwards to look at himself. It turned bright red. "You see," said Kiki, "you felt embarrassed, didn't you?" "Yes," said Kenneth. "Well, there you are. If you want to be green, for instance, try feeling envious." So he tried, and sure enough, he turned green. Then Kiki told him to pretend to feel frightened, and he turned yellow, and to feel angry, and he turned black, and to feel old and tired, and he turned grey. "Now," said Kiki, "try feeling unhappy." "No," said Kenneth, rolling his eyes madly. "Now I've met you, blue's the one colour I'm never going to be. Let's go fly zapping." And from then on, the flies never had another chance to laugh at Kenneth the chameleon. Zap! They never knew what hit them.